Okay, welcome everyone. I see we're just about at 2 o'clock here, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started because we have quite a bit to cover today. And I'll get us started with some introductions and a couple of housekeeping items just so we can get the ball rolling, and then other people may join us as we continue on here. So good afternoon and welcome to everyone who's joining us here today. Today's education session is called Nothing About Us Without Us, creating the first Canadian Charter of Rights for people with dementia. This event is part of the University Health Network Memory Clinic Dementia Care Partner Education Workshop Series in collaboration with the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto and the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. And the University Health Network would like to extend a thank you to their donors for their support. My name is Riley Melbourne, and I'm one of the speakers here today presenting on behalf of the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. So I'm going to start us off with some introductions, and by providing all of you with a bit of an overview of what to expect from today's presentation. So today we are joined by two staff from the University Health Network Memory Clinic, Maria and Elena. Maria graduated with a master's degree from the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Toronto in 2000. She has worked in different capacities as a medical social worker in inpatient acute care settings, as well as outpatient clinics. And she has been working at the Memory Clinic since 2007. She also holds the position of adjunct lecturer at the Factor Enwintosh Faculty of Social Work at the University of Toronto. And Maria will be helping us to moderate the question and answer period of this presentation, and will be providing us with more information about the University Health Network Memory Clinic. Elena is a registered nurse working part-time at the Memory Clinic. She's been working at the University Health Network for the past 25 years, and over her career, she's worked in many different settings, including general medicine, general surgical, and family medicine. She currently works as a clinic nurse at the Memory Clinic and has been doing so for the past 4 years. And in her role, she supports people with dementia and their care partners throughout their dementia journey. We're also joined today by Romina Oliviero, who is presenting on behalf of her colleague Shred Dunkel, who is unable to make it to the presentation today. Romina is the Community Partnerships Manager for the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto. And in her role, Romina is responsible for community partnerships, creating and managing relationships with key stakeholders, and supporting dedicated collaborations. She also supports the Dementia Friendly Communities Initiative, Active Living Program or Young Onset Adult Day Program, the Toronto Dementia Network, and the City of Toronto Caregiver Strategy, amongst other projects. Romina has over 20 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, including international development, advocacy organizations, and the healthcare sector. Romina studied social development studies at the University of Waterloo and is a graduate of the gerontology program at Ryerson University and the dementia studies program at Conestoga College in Waterloo. For a bit of background on the Alzheimer's Society, for those of you who might not be familiar with us, the Alzheimer's Society is the leading not-for-profit health organization working nationwide to improve the quality of life for Canadians affected by dementia and to advance the search for the cause and the cure. Staff and volunteers at local Alzheimer's Society offices, like the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto, provide support programs, educational resources, and referral services to support people living with dementia, their families, and care partners. And next, I'm going to introduce Roger Marple, who's joining us today from Medicine Hat, Alberta. Roger was diagnosed with young onset Alzheimer's disease in 2015. Since his diagnosis, Roger has been a passionate advocate for people living with dementia and has shared his story in numerous media interviews, public speaking events, awareness campaigns, and more, where he offers his unique insights as someone with lived experience of dementia. Roger has recently assumed the role of co-chair of the Alzheimer's Society of Canada's advisory group of people living with dementia, and he will be co-presenting with me today on the topic of the first ever Canadian Charter of Rights for people living with dementia. And lastly, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Riley Melbourne, and I am a Knowledge Transfer and Exchange Associate at the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. I'm a member of the research and education team at the Society, and in my role, I look after the educational materials that the Society produces for people living with dementia, care partners, and healthcare providers. I have a master's degree in gerontology from Simon Fraser University, and my research background is in dementia-friendly communities. So before we get started, I would like to just address a couple of brief housekeeping items so that you all know what to expect from the session today. So we will be together for about an hour and a half. There will be certain points throughout the presentation where we will be pausing for questions, and we will only be accepting questions via chat. So if you do have any questions, please type them into the chat box. This session is being recorded, so if you do have to leave early or someone you know wasn't able to make it today, you can reach out to us about how to access that recording after the presentation. There will also be a post-presentation survey available that you'll receive through email, and we ask that you please take a few moments to fill that out after the presentation so that we can hear your feedback. And so now I'm going to pass the mic, so to speak, over to Maria so that she can speak to us briefly about the University Health Network's Memory Clinic before we get started on our charter presentation.
Thank you so much, Riley. Elena and I, as part of the UHN Memory Clinic, are very happy to be collaborating with the Alzheimer's Society of Canada and of Toronto for this event. And I just wanted to, in a minute or two, just summarize what we do at the Memory Clinic for the people who are joining us. So the Memory Clinic is just a group of healthcare specialists, and our goal is really to help patients overcome and deal with cognitive changes that include disorders of memory, language, thinking, and or personality. And we also have a Memory Clinic trials unit where we conduct research and clinical trials. So we are a group of cognitive neurologists, geriatric psychiatrists, geriatrician, a nurse, which is Elena, an occupational therapist, and myself as a social worker. You can advance the slide, please. Thank you. And so if you or anyone that you are taking care of or looking after notice any changes in memory, language, thinking, or personality, you can certainly make a referral to the Memory Clinic. And these are some of the symptoms that you may be noticing. So changes in daily activities or in job performance, someone being a bit more forgetful or having trouble with their short-term memory, someone who might need more reminders or are forgetting recent conversations, someone who might ask the same question over and over again, difficulty remembering appointments or forgetting to take medications, getting lost in familiar areas, and also changes in personality. So people being much less interested in their day-to-day tasks or feeling sad or irritable. So if you or anyone that you know are experiencing some of these symptoms, we are taking referrals despite COVID. And so there will be some information about how to make a referral to our program. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. So we're so glad to be able to present today on the first Canadian Charter of Rights for people with dementia. And again, we want to thank all of you for taking the time to attend this presentation and to participate in this very important conversation with us. We also want to thank the University Health Network for providing us with this opportunity to present to you all today, and our colleagues at the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto for co-presenting with us and for their support with this presentation. So before we begin the presentation itself, I would just like to mention that as Roger and I were planning this presentation, we spoke a few times about how part of the reason that we're really looking forward to today is because we would really like to use it as an opportunity to see what kind of questions you have and what your thoughts and ideas are around this. So we would encourage you to use the chat box function to share what you can and what you're comfortable with, and also to continue this conversation outside of today's session and with others in your own network. And we know that there's going to be a wide variety of experiences here today. Some of you may be very well versed in dementia or human rights, while others might be quite new to all of this. And I'm sure that a lot of us are in between. And I think it's fair to say that every person here today is still learning, including us. And we just want you all to be assured that this is an environment where we really encourage questions, because it's through having these conversations and sharing our ideas that we'll really be able to move forward. So Roger, as my co-presenter, is there anything that you wanted to say to welcome the folks here, or to kick us off?
Well, I just wanted to mention I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled that you're here too. So hopefully by the end of the presentation, it'll help you get your head around this a bit better.
Thanks, Roger. Can we move to the next slide, please? So as we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, the focus today will be on dementia and human rights, specifically on the first ever Canadian Charter of Rights for people living with dementia. And there are three primary goals of today's presentation. The first being to provide context for why the first Canadian Charter of Rights for people with dementia was created. The second being to review the charter and provide ideas on how to use it. And the third being to encourage participants to think critically about how they can take a rights-based approach to dementia. Next slide, please. Leading us into the conversation around the charter, let's begin by introducing the Alzheimer's Society of Canada's advisory group of people living with dementia, who were the leaders and the driving force behind the creation of the charter. The advisory group consists of members from 7 of our 10 provinces, and the group advises on Alzheimer's Society work, including research, education, advocacy, marketing, and fund development initiatives. And the group has been busy, having created the charter and a number of other resources over the past few years. So now I'm going to turn it over to Roger to talk a little bit more about the advisory group's role in developing the charter.
Well, I guess this goes back a few years now, but I remember being a part of this advisory group, and as mentioned, we tend to give input and help steer the ship on the work that Alzheimer's Canada is doing. And they said, you know what, a lot of countries have a dementia charter of rights, and we should do this in Canada. So we were all thrilled by this, but I think thinking back on putting this charter together, in reality, if you read the document, it may not seem like a whole lot, but that was a year in the making. You would not believe the debates we had, and we left no stones unturned. Right? And it did take quite a while, but at the end of the day, we were able to come up with this. And there is something, I just want to interject something here. So that's this, and I didn't see it coming. When we first designed this charter of rights, I've had a number of people reach out to me about it. And I want to point out that a lot of people have the perception that this is a special charter of rights. And something I really want to point out right away is this isn't special rights. These are all rights that we all enjoy. We just gave examples of how our rights could look towards people within a dementia journey. That's all. But they're all the same rights that we all enjoy. So these aren't special rights. So I needed to point that out.
Thanks, Roger. So now we're going to take a few minutes to provide a bit of context and background information around dementia and human rights. So when I say that it's important to take a rights-based approach to dementia, some of you might be wondering what exactly is meant by that. A rights-based approach allows people to know and claim their rights. It means that individuals in the communities in which they live acknowledge the rights of the person with dementia. And it also means that people with dementia and their care partners should be fully encouraged and supported to participate in the development of policies and practices which affect their lives. And there is a growing international movement towards a rights-based approach for people with dementia and those who care for them. We know that people with dementia, as Roger said, are individuals with the same human rights as anyone without dementia, including the right to manage their own lives. However, we also know that people with dementia still face stigma and discrimination solely because of their diagnosis. And internationally, we've seen examples of how different people and organizations are taking a rights-based approach to dementia. And as Roger mentioned, our charter was built on international examples of similar work. So Charter of Rights for people with dementia have been developed in countries like Ireland, Scotland, and New Zealand. And on this slide, you'll actually see a really neat picture which was sent to us by Alzheimer's New Zealand. So this is their advisory group holding copies of the Canadian Charter of Rights for people with dementia and also copies of their very own dementia declaration. So before we move on to the next slide, Roger, I'm going to ask you to share with everyone the analogy that you have around human rights.
Oh, yeah. I always throw this in, and this is a food for thought comment. It's just a comment. If a tree falls in the woods, you heard this expression, this analogy, if a tree falls in the woods and it falls down and no one hears it, did the tree really fall? Okay, so this could be applied to human rights for all of us. So in other words, if a human right isn't being adhered to, and say hypothetically no one really cares and no one supports the person, if it's a legitimate right, is it even a right, right? And I'm a big believer that if someone's rights or an overarching thing, I always use dementia jokes as an example, which I will, but if no one seems to care about it, is it a right, right? You know, so I always feel that it's all of our jobs to ensure that we all enjoy the rights that we all enjoy in Canada.
Absolutely. Thanks, Roger, for sharing that. Can we move to the next slide, please? In this slide, we'll be asking the question, why is a Charter of Rights for people with dementia needed? And I suspect that those of you here today who are healthcare providers and those of you who are either living with dementia or caring for someone who is, know why a Charter of Rights for people with dementia is needed. Canadians living with dementia are entitled to the same human rights as every other Canadian, as outlined in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. However, stigma and discrimination are huge barriers for people with dementia and often contravene these rights. And stigma around dementia is a significant issue globally, including right here in Canada. In November 2017, the Alzheimer's Society of Canada surveyed over 1,500 Canadians to get their thoughts and insights on Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. And the graph that you see on this slide demonstrates how those with lived experience of dementia perceive top-rated forms of discrimination more strongly than those who do not have lived experience. So those who do have lived experience of dementia identified the top forms of discrimination as being ignored or dismissed, difficulty accessing appropriate supports and services, and frequently being taken advantage of. And in blue, you see the percentage of people without personal experience of dementia that thought that people with dementia might experience these forms of discrimination. And in yellow, you see the number of people with personal experience of dementia who perceive these as forms of discrimination. And a lack of understanding and the stigma around dementia can have a very real effect on how dementia is talked about, in how services are funded and designed, and also in how people with dementia and care partners are engaged in the policies, programs, and services that directly impact them. So Roger, you've done a lot of advocacy work around dementia, and you've done a lot of work to challenge the stigma around dementia. So I'd like to turn it back to you to touch on why it's so important to challenge stigma and why you became a dementia advocate.
Wow. Boy, oh boy, I could eat up this whole conversation just on this topic. I swear to God. And I can remember being diagnosed with dementia, and boy, I could share some whopper stories on how stigma's affected my life and people around me and people I know living with dementia. And for every action, there's a reaction. So we always hear these comments where we have a catch-22 in Canada. So here's the catch-22. If we are to actually make stigma go away, actually make it go away, change the culture, we need to speak openly, often, without reservation, right? Comfortably. This is a comfortable topic to talk about if you're used to talking about it. But on the other side of the coin, the catch-22 is stigma drives people underground. Stigma drives people into silence. And this is one of the few diseases or conditions in the world where we're still experiencing this challenge. So I want to give an example of how I challenge stigma. So there's many faces to stigma. Like there are so many examples that I bet you everyone in this group could give towards stigma. So I'm just going to use one example. And that example is the joke culture in public media towards dementia. So when you open up your Facebook page, jokes and birthday cards or retirement cards towards dementia, like it's everywhere. And when I did some homework, my initial findings, I found 40 pages, 10 per page of websites that are totally dedicated to Alzheimer's jokes. And you all see it on your Facebook feeds. There's jokes. So what has happened is this behavior, although it's a horrible behavior and it demeans people with dementia and it drives them further and further underground. The first time I seen a dementia joke, I felt it was like a punch in the stomach. Was my reaction. I said, are you serious? You're making fun of a disease with no cure, nothing in place to slow it down. You don't see people making ALS jokes, right? So why is it fair game for people in Canada? So anyway, that's a behavior I hate. So what I found out was, we have a right to be free from discrimination of any kind. And the way I see Alzheimer's jokes, that is verbal abuse disguised as a joke. That's how I see it personally. So I advocate all the time to people when they post these jokes, please don't do it. And here's why. And one thing I found out, like I would make simple comments like, people living with dementia and their families who live with this disease as much as we do. You understand they have enough going on, and being the brunt of 1,000 jokes sure doesn't help, right? So I make this point, and 95% of the time they would reply, I never thought of that. So that told me that people aren't bad people. They really aren't. They just don't know they're perpetuating stigma, whatever way that may look. So when I pointed out, I didn't threaten them that this is a right. I didn't even bring it into the conversation. All I had to do was go to the court of public opinion and plead my case. I didn't take them to court. I didn't threaten them. That's not why these rights are in place, but if you want to die on the hill and take someone to court, that's okay too. That's why we enjoy our rights. But I often use the court of public opinion for advocating towards things. And quite quickly, people are very quick to pick up on this. And that is how we're going to influence and make change, by speaking openly. Did that help, Riley?
Absolutely. No, that was great, Roger. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that, picking up on Roger's points here, speaking about these issues is a very important step. But, in order to make change, really the rights of people with dementia need to be enshrined into public policies, organizational practices, and be operationalized. And that's where a document like this charter comes in. A Charter of Rights can drive change in how dementia-specific services are designed and delivered. It can change the way that dementia is communicated and described in the public, as Roger was just referring to. It can influence dementia research priorities and advocacy messages, and it can change the ways that people with dementia are engaged with policymakers and politicians. And later on in this presentation, we are going to talk a bit more about how the Charter can be used to achieve these goals and how we encourage people to use the Charter to reflect on how they can be more inclusive of people with dementia and more aware of
It's
their
so
rights.
small. Like, who even can get in?
Next slide, please.
Hey, Riley, one more comment towards that.
Sure.
No, but how could a boat go through here?
Someone's talking.
Oh, sorry, there's a bit of background noise. Can everybody make sure to mute themselves, please?
Okay, there's just one more point towards the advocacy part of it. I
Sure.
want to share with you a success story. Since I've started challenging dementia jokes, something remarkable happened. I don't even know, I'd have to check. I have around 2,300 Twitter followers. I have 300 friends on Facebook. And here's what happened when I was comfortable speaking openly. This amazing thing happened. I noticed that on my timelines, anywhere I looked, dementia jokes started dropping, right? And this is one person, one voice. And all of a sudden I see less and less and less jokes. And I want to share with you, in 2,800 people, I have not seen one single dementia joke across any timeline that I'm involved with personally. Like not one. And the other amazing benefit that I found amazing is that my friends started challenging the jokes. They got it, right? They don't know a damn thing about dementia, and that's okay, but they do know it's wrong, right? And all of a sudden, all these people are starting to challenge a joke. So if a joke did surface, I didn't even have to mention it. Someone else jumped in. So that's just an example of how our voices can make a difference. And my point is, what if we all did that?
Mm-hmm.
We could literally change a culture in Canada in a short period of time. I mean it. And I can so clearly see this. We do not need a research study to tell us this. Anyway, thanks, Riley.
No, that's, I'm glad you added that, Roger. I think it really speaks, again, like you said, that to the power of sharing your experiences and raising your voice. And I know we spoke about this last week when we chatted on the phone about the ripple effect of sharing your experiences with other people as well. So I'm glad that you added that piece. So on this slide, I thought it would be important to pause for a moment and highlight how the recent situation around long-term care and COVID-19 in Canada perfectly illustrates why a Charter of Rights for people with dementia is needed. And what you see on this slide is a series of screenshots from real news headlines that have been released since the COVID-19 pandemic began. Many of the residents in long-term care homes across Canada live with dementia, and while certainly not all long-term care homes are represented by these headlines, they really capture how there's a need for a fundamental shift in how we resource and fund long-term care in Canada, and also in how we approach and talk about these issues. And the Charter is a tool that can help us reframe these conversations that we so desperately need to have, and encourages the involvement of people with dementia and care partners in these conversations as well. Next slide, please. So to wrap up our discussion of why a Charter of Rights is needed, in the next couple of slides, I'll be reading quotes from two members of our advisory group that speak to what the Charter means to them. So Marilyn says, I don't hide that I have Alzheimer's, but it's my choice when and how to talk about it. Our Charter of Rights is a reminder for me and those who interact with me that I'm still here and I'm still a person. Next slide, please. Jim says, imagine if a person getting diagnosed with dementia right now could see this charter hanging on the wall of their doctor's office or on their local Alzheimer's Society's webpage. Next slide, please. There it is, clear and reassuring. I have rights. I should expect support and living life as fully as I wish, and I have a voice, my own voice. And knowing that this charter was developed by people living with dementia gives it increased relevance and importance. It's a reflection of nothing about us without us. And Roger, is there anything else that you'd like to add here about why the charter is important to you?
Well, it just empowers me to live my life. And knowing in the back of my head I enjoy the same rights we all enjoy, right? You know, so, and examples of how those rights can apply in my life. There was a comment from Jim Mann here. Go back to his slide, would you? So Jim's wish is that healthcare providers would actually hang this charter in their offices. And conversations I've had with the people in the healthcare industry towards our charter of rights, some knee-jerk reactions is, what, isn't my work big enough for you? Or do you have a complaint here? And it's quite the opposite to me. I have no complaints. The care that I have received from our health services has been wonderful. And my personal experience is that I applaud the work you do, and a big part of why I'm doing well is due to your efforts. And, you know, Jim's wish to have this sitting in your office is a homage, in my eyes, to the great work that you do recognizing these rights, because I have never had a situation where this applied to me in my world. So my hat's off to you. And in no way is this charter any criticizing our health care services in my world anyway.
Thanks, Roger. And just before we move on, I just see a comment here. For those of you who are calling in, could you please press *6 to mute yourselves, just so we can help limit some of the background noise here. So again, if you are calling in, you can press *6 and that should mute you. So thank you for that. And can we please move forward to the next slide? Thank you. So we also just wanted to briefly touch on the difference between a right and a privilege, as these can sometimes get confused. So a right is defined as an inherent, irrevocable entitlement held by all citizens or human beings, while a privilege is an entitlement that is conditional. So a great example of something that many people believe is a right but is actually a privilege is having a driver's license. So before we move on, we are going to pause here just to see if there are any questions about what we've discussed so far, or any comments or feedback that you'd like to share. So if there is anything that you'd like to ask or share with us, please feel free to type your questions into the chat box. So for those of you who are joining us online, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little chat icon, and you can enter in your questions there. And I'll pass things back over to Maria to help us moderate this if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Riley and Roger. There is one comment in the group chat, and this is for Roger. I really appreciate that perspective of jokes perpetuating stigma. Wonderfully put.
Well, it's a pet hate of mine, so it's something we all can change in the here and now. Our conversations often reflect, okay, here's the problem with stigma, but what we're not doing, I find publicly, is we're not having conversations on how to actually make the stigma go away and what actions we can take to change that. So that was a good example towards that.
Thank you, Roger. It doesn't appear that there are any questions at this time.
Okay, great. So then we will move forward. So on this slide here, you'll actually see a screenshot of the charter itself. And I do want to emphasize the fact that our charter is not a legal document, but it does complement the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And as we mentioned earlier, it demonstrates how these rights apply to someone with dementia. And as Roger said, these are not special rights, rather they're rights that we all have as Canadians. And our charter defines 7 explicit rights to empower Canadians living with dementia to self-advocate, while also ensuring that the people and organizations that support them know and protect these rights. And in the next series of slides, we'll be reviewing each of these rights and also providing a brief example to help illustrate what the right could look like in practice. Next slide, please. So the first right listed on the charter is that a person with dementia has the right to be free from discrimination of any kind. And an example of this is that a person with dementia has the right to be offered the same level of post-diagnosis support that someone with cancer or heart disease would be. Next slide, please. The second right is to benefit from all civic and legal rights. So for example, a person with dementia should be assumed capable of voting and conducting legal affairs until proven otherwise. Next slide, please. A person with dementia also has the right to participate in developing and implementing policies that affect their life. So for example, a person with dementia should be provided with the opportunity to input into national dementia strategies or in the development of local community-based policies. Next slide, please. So to help illustrate the right that we just spoke about, let's take a look at how people living with dementia were involved in the creation of Canada's National Dementia Strategy, which was released last year. So to develop this strategy, the government consulted many different stakeholders, including people living with dementia and care partners. In May 2018, the National Dementia Conference brought together close to 200 participants, including people living with dementia and care partners, to identify challenges, solutions, and opportunities related to dementia. And prior to the conference, roundtables were held, which brought together participants, again, including people living with dementia, to discuss what living well with dementia looks like. And they provided feedback on how innovation can best support living well with dementia and possible ways to break through existing barriers and identify priorities for dementia research and innovation. And as part of the National Dementia Strategy, 5 principles were identified to set values and guide action on dementia in Canada. And one of these principles is actually human rights, which you'll see I added a star beside in this slide. So having the principle here means that actions taken under the strategy respect the human rights of those living with dementia and reflect and reinforce Canada's domestic and international commitments to human rights. And so this is one example of the value and the importance of including the voices of people with lived experience in policies that affect their lives. Next slide, please. A person with dementia also has the right to access support so that they can live as independently as possible and be as engaged as possible in their community. And this can help the person meet their physical, cognitive, social, and spiritual needs, get involved in the community and civic opportunities, and also access opportunities for lifelong learning. And an example of this is that a person with dementia has the right to be offered rehabilitation after a stroke. And I'm just going to pause here for a moment because Roger, I know in one of our phone calls the other week, you mentioned that you've had some conversations with healthcare providers around in your area around this before. So would you like to share what we spoke about with everyone here?
Well, I've seen examples of, and I shared one in a blog on the Alzheimer's website, where community service was offered to everybody but people with dementia. But the example I'm going to bring up is I can remember right in my town at a public event, there was some occupational therapists that worked within our health services. And I've always been curious about this. I walked up to her and I said, you offer services for brain injury, right, to help them from a rehabilitative point of view. And they go, yes, we do, proudly. And so that should be. And I made a comment. I said, I'm curious, when you have every doctor in Canada sitting across the desk from you, showing why it's important to keep your mind engaged, exercising your brain. I said, why don't you guys offer services like that? And I gave examples. I said, you could share memory tips and tricks with them, how to live better. You can maybe approach it from a brain injury point of view, from a rehabilitative point of view, to help keep the mind engaged. And therefore, it's equating to a better quality of life. And I gave a bunch of other examples. And after I gave those examples, the lady quite frankly told me, we don't offer this to people with dementia. And I said, why not? And they said, because it's how did she put it? Because it's a progressive disease and we do not see any benefit of offering services to people with dementia. And then I go back, and here's what's so wrong about it and sad, is that here I am trying to explain to them that this journey is different for everybody. But I said, I know many people after a diagnosis, myself included, that have been living quite well for a number of years, right? And I said, why do you look at it so much from end of life? I said, wait, back up the conversation here. Holy cow, you guys. But, and I've had this response 3 different times. It was almost as if the answer was rehearsed, because it was the exact same reply. We see no benefits. It's a progressive disease, and therefore those services aren't offered to you. And it was almost like they had it rehearsed. And the other point, they said that there's studies that show there's no benefit to offering this. Well, for every study that shows that, there's probably 5 studies that shows that there are benefits. So what study are you looking at? What study are you recognizing? Have you really done your homework? So I challenge things like that.
Thanks, Roger. And I mean, as you mentioned, you've been addressing this as part of your advocacy work, and have you made any progress around this at all?
Actually, I haven't. Thanks for triggering that. I mentioned to Riley earlier today, so if I don't mention, prod me. But I got some occupationalists that agree with me. And there's clear avenues where I could go to our health services from an effective complaint and appeal process. Our health services have very clear avenues to do this, but I don't think I'd want to go that route. I would rather, once again, go with the court of public opinion. But, I've seen a number of occupational therapists in Canada saying, you know what, that guy's right. Why aren't we offering this? So there is occupational therapists that agree with that comment, and they're questioning why they're not doing it, right? So there is some cool action. Once again, speaking openly, speaking without reservation, comfortably. For every action, there's a reaction.
Roger, I just wanted to add something to that, because there is a comment in the post for you from an occupational therapist who says, yikes, read Roger's comment about speaking with occupational therapists about rehab for people with dementia. Not all OTs feel that way.
Yes,
so just,
and I know that, but whoever wrote that comment, maybe help me out, advocate for it, right? We sure are. So help us out with that. Help us out with that. And God love you for saying that.
Thanks, Roger. And yeah, I just thought that would be such, an interesting story to share. And again, it just really demonstrates the importance of having these conversations, and that these are, real life challenges that some people are facing.
Riley,
oh, sorry.
Tie that conversation to a right for us.
Okay, well, let's see here. I'm going to see which number
on the spot
here. I mean, it links to the right that we were just talking about, that a person with dementia has the right to access support so that they can live their lives as independently as possible and be as engaged as possible in their communities. So it links, it links right back into what we're talking about, which is great. So a great example, again, to illustrate that point. Yeah. And so before we move on to the next slide, I did just want to mention again, for those of you who are on the call with us and who are actually calling into the line, that you please press *6 to mute yourselves, just to help us manage some of the background noise. So again, if you are calling in, please press *6 and that will mute you. So can we move to the next slide, please? So a person with dementia also has the right to get the information that they need to participate in decisions that affect them, including from point of diagnosis to palliative and end-of-life care. And this right in practice could look like a healthcare provider speaking directly to the person with dementia rather than just their care partner, and respecting their ability to make decisions. Next slide, please. A person with dementia also has the right to expect that the professionals involved in their care are trained in both dementia and human rights, held accountable for protecting their human rights, treating them with respect and dignity, and offering them equal access to appropriate treatment options as they develop health conditions other than their dementia. And this right can be practiced through the person with dementia becoming involved in staff training for healthcare providers. And I think it's helpful to keep in mind, as Roger mentioned before, that the Charter isn't only a helpful tool for people with dementia and their care partners to know the person's rights, but it's also a really great tool for healthcare providers to help support them in their own roles as well. And I did want to share with all of you on the next slide some recent work that the Alzheimer's Society of Canada supported that actually reflects this right in action. So when the COVID-19 pandemic began, there were some concerns early on about whether there would be enough life-saving equipment available if the number of cases in Canada rose too quickly and then exceeded the healthcare resources that we had available. And in response to this concern, the Alzheimer's Society of Canada's COVID-19 and Dementia Task Force developed guidelines for frontline and healthcare staff. And these guidelines were designed to help staff if they needed to make difficult decisions about allocating life-saving resources, to help ensure that the rights and dignity of people living with dementia were protected. And so this is just one example of what taking a rights-based approach to dementia can look like. And you can read these guidelines on the COVID section of our website, and you can also see a blog post written about the guidelines from one of the members from our advisory group, who you see pictured here on the slide, on the Alzheimer's Society blog. Next slide, please. And finally, the person with dementia has the right to access effective complaint and appeal procedures when their rights are not respected. And an example of this in practice could be organizations ensuring that their complaint procedures are deemed accessible by a person with dementia. And Roger, I know you mentioned when we spoke earlier that this is, maybe a right that you wanted to speak to in a bit more detail, because there are some, I guess, challenges that you find with it. And I think you spoke about this a little bit earlier in terms of methods of challenging these kind of things.
This is an area where I guess if you decide, I use the expression to die on a hill, or to really get a point across, there's a couple things. One, I found that if our rights have not been adhered to, I have found often that if you bring the right into the conversation, not so much from a threatening point of view, but just pointing out, hey, this is a right. Often this can be resolved from a simple conversation. Everyone has the "I'm going to take you to court" attitude. Well, that's a last resort. There's many other avenues you can explore, and one I do often is the court of public opinion. Right? I think that's a great avenue. But there are times where, when I brought up the joke-telling culture, there probably isn't an avenue that you could actually go to and say, hey, they're making fun of me and that's demeaning, so I don't want that done. There's no one that can change that. That's a court of public opinion approach, I feel. But, if you're having a hard time and you want to make a point, you want to appeal or make a point, you're not sure where to go, the only advice I can give you is ask around and ask people's opinion. People in the know, could be our Alzheimer's Society or people like Maria. There's a lot of people that might just go, oh, I know, go talk here, talk to this person, talk to this organization, whatever it is. There is avenues out there, but you may have to reach out and get people's opinion to approach it, if indeed it is something you want to pursue.
Sure. Thanks, Roger. So we are going to take another pause here now that we've gone over the charter, to see if there are any questions that we can address at this point. And again, I'll just pass things back over to Maria to help us moderate this part of the presentation.
We'll just wait to see if any questions come through, but Roger, for you again, from Margot at Inclusive Aging. She was the occupational therapist who had made the comment before. Thank you so much, Margot. It says that she will advocate, and sometimes you have to advocate within your own profession too. So she will be advocating. So that's good to hear. Thank you.
I love you, Margot.
At this point, there's no other questions that have come through, so we can continue, I think.
Sounds good. Thanks, Maria. So for this next section of the presentation, Roger and I are going to provide a series of ideas that we can all use to take a rights-based approach to dementia and to use the Charter. We've split up the ideas by 4 different audiences. So people living with dementia, care partners, healthcare providers, and Alzheimer's Society staff. But it's important to keep in mind that many of the strategies that we'll talk about over the next few slides will work for anyone. So they aren't just limited to the specific group that we've associated them with in this presentation. So we are going to start off by speaking a little bit about how people living with dementia can use the Charter as a self-advocacy tool. And Roger, would you like to talk about these strategies on these slides, or would you like me to go ahead with them?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so the first, well, I guess first of all, it's important for us to mention that, you know, as we've talked about throughout this presentation, the Charter really empowers people living with dementia to ensure that their rights are protected and respected. And the Charter can be used as a self-advocacy tool. So some ways that the Charter could potentially be used by someone with dementia is mentioning it if you write letters or call your local government representative. You can speak to the media about the Charter and about your lived experiences. And you can also help others reflect on how they're living the principles of the Charter and where they might improve. Next slide, please. You can also share the Charter with politicians, other people with dementia, policymakers, funders, and partners in advocacy, such as groups who serve people with disabilities or who are interested in dementia or age-friendly, inclusive communities. And you can also share your story to help challenge stigma and encourage others to use a rights-based approach. And Roger, I just wanted to check in, is there anything that you'd like to add here?
Yeah. It's just my overarching philosophy with anything to do with dementia. I keep going back to more people speaking openly, breaking past that stigma. You just get past that and speak openly, because if we're going to expedite anything, it will be done by the voice of the many, not the voice of the few. So one passion of mine is better funding for research, dementia research. What if we were all advocating for that? Or what if we were all advocating for occupational therapists to include us in the care? Or what if we were all advocating for this, all advocating for that? Do you have any idea how quickly we could move things ahead? Right? If everybody challenged dementia jokes, boom, we've changed the culture, right? You know, we've done it and did it quickly, right? So if there's people listening, please keep that in your mind.
Thanks, Roger. So moving on to the next slide, we're going to provide some ideas for how care partners can use the Charter. And again, it's helpful to remember that the Charter empowers care partners as much as it does the person with dementia to ensure that their rights and the rights of the person they're supporting are protected and respected. And one way that care partners can use the Charter, if the person that they're caring for lives in long-term care, is by joining the family council in that long-term care home and having conversations with staff and others on the council about the value of a rights-based approach to dementia. And this is a really great way to support the home and the residents and to begin or continue the conversation around using human rights as a lens in care. The charter is also a great way for care partners to challenge both themselves and those around them to ensure that the rights of people living with dementia are being respected. And this can be supported through listening to people living with dementia and supporting them in making sure that their voices are heard. And another way that care partners can use the charter is by using it as an advocacy tool when sharing their own experiences of supporting someone with dementia. Care partners have a powerful voice in care, in service provision, and in policies around dementia, and they can use their unique experiences, perspectives, and skills to support organizations to embed a rights-based approach into their culture. And Roger, I think we've touched on it a few times, but would you like to comment on, again, on how sharing your experiences can have a ripple effect? I know we talked about that before as well.
Well, I advocate a lot, actually. I've done a ton of newspaper articles, TV interviews, local interviews in my paper. I've sat, given speeches, all these things. And what's my reward is the ripple effect, right? You know, so if something comes out of your mouth, and I can remember sharing a memory tips and tricks document that Alzheimer's Canada and I did. And someone said, wow, has that ever come in handy for me? You know, and oh, that's wonderful. You know, so it's the ripple effect. But one comment I want to make, once again, goes back to speaking openly. Often, and you don't even know you're doing it, is when you make a comment or a view or whatever it is that's coming out of your mouth, a couple benefits. One, you're blowing stigma out of the water just by your lips moving. But the other thing that I've noticed, and it's happened even to me, is another person's comment or experience, whatever it may look like, is another person's life goal, right? They got something out of that, right? And they may have incorporated into their life, or maybe it's an overarching philosophy that they never thought of, who knows, right? But one person's comment is another person's lifeboat, trust me when I tell you that.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks, Roger.
Welcome.
Can we move to the next slide, please? So here we'll speak to some examples about how healthcare providers can use the charter. And again, going back to Jim's wish, as Roger referred to it at the beginning, is one way that healthcare providers can use the charter is by hanging the charter in their office to demonstrate their commitment to respecting the rights of people with dementia and to help start conversations around dementia. Another way that healthcare providers can use the charter is by hosting lunch and learn educational sessions on the charter in their community with the leadership from people with lived experience, which includes care partners. And the last strategy we've identified here is to embed the charter and those values in staff recruitment interview questions and in organizational policies so that human rights are something that ground practice, values, policies, and philosophy. And these are just a few examples, again, of how healthcare providers can use the charter, but hopefully these strategies can help to spark other ideas as well. Next slide, please. And our last examples are focused on how Alzheimer's Society staff can use the charter. Roger, did you want to lead the discussion here, or would you like me to?
No, I'll jump in wherever.
Sure. Okay, so I'll start reading these off here then. Alzheimer's Society staff can use the charter by adding a link to the charter on staff email signature blocks. You can use the charter as a foundational touchstone in the supervision of staff and in employee performance reviews. You can talk about the charter in initial conversations with clients, share it with them during those conversations, and also in orientation with new staff. You can share the charter with provincial and local organizations, including colleges and university professional health discipline faculties, with an offer to do in-person information sessions. Next slide, please. You can also share the ways that you're using the charter with others, so including with other Alzheimer's societies to help create a national dialogue with shared perspectives and approaches. And you can hand out copies of the charter during public events. And actually, I brought a little show and tell here with me. This is a pocket-sized version of the charter that we typically do hand out at events and presentations. And so it opens up like this, and people can bring it with them. And like I said, it fits in your pocket or your purse or your handbag or whatever it is. And you can bring it around and share it with people that way as well. And so these pocket-sized versions and also full-page versions of the charter are available from your local Alzheimer's Society, if anybody is interested in getting some copies of that. So Roger, are there any comments that you wanted to add here, or should we move along?
Just one quick one. When we look at the charter, this is being supported coast to coast by all our Alzheimer's Society. We talk often about operationalizing our Charter of Rights, like how do we actually intertwine it in our lives. And you as an organization, I would like to encourage nationwide dialogue. I mean, from everybody within the organization is how are you going to make the Charter of Rights a reflex action in your work? Right? Is it going to be part of your orientation with people? Are you going to bring it up later? Are you only going to bring it up if there's issues? I don't know. I don't know what your approach, and I don't know if you know. I don't know. So I would love to encourage all our Alzheimer's societies across Canada to put a lot of thought into this and share views and ideas on how you're going to make this a reflex action in your work.
Absolutely. Thanks, Roger. And I see your comment here. I'm sorry, I will speak more slowly. I know I tend to, when I start reading things off, I tend to speed up my speaking. So sorry about that. I will slow it down as we wrap things up here. So can we move to the next slide, please? So to help illustrate how some of these strategies have been used in practice, I thought that we could wrap up this part of the discussion by providing some examples of how the Alzheimer's Society of Canada has used the Charter in practice since its release. So one way that we've used the Charter is by promoting it through public awareness campaigns, media interviews, blog posts, web content, handouts at public events, through email signature blocks, and also when we're having conversations with healthcare providers and policymakers. And another way that we've used the Charter is through delivering presentations on the Charter in various forums. This is, one example of those. And in order to help bring awareness to the Charter, we also keep the conversation going during these forums, and we encourage others to also use it as an advocacy tool. And another strategy that we've used is that we've actually posted floor to ceiling posters of the Charter at the front of our office. So it's the first thing that you see when you walk in. And this really helps to start conversations about the Charter. And we also, as I mentioned, we have these pocket-sized versions available that we do provide at public presentations. It's obviously much harder to do in their virtual presentations, but when we are back to in-person, that's something that we'll continue to do as well. Next slide, please.
Can I make a comment, Riley?
Absolutely.
Just a quick comment. There's people watching this. If you're interested in getting your own copy, a number of ways to do it, swing by your Alzheimer's office. But if you Google Alzheimer's Canada Charter of Rights, it'll bring you right to a page. And there's some cool things here that you probably might want to look at. There's a couple cool videos, stuff like that. But the actual charter's there that you could look at, print it off, that kind of thing as well. I just thought I'd point that out, Riley.
No, that's great. Thanks, Roger. So some other ways that the Alzheimer's Society of Canada has used the Charter is through staff members posting copies of the Charter on their desks. And again, that's a really great conversation starter. We're also continuing to take steps to ensure that the voices of people with lived experience are reflected in our work. So this is helping us to continue ensuring that we're embedding the rights of people with dementia into the culture of our organization. And lastly, we're continuing to advocate for the rights of people living with dementia and care partners in partnership with them, and are providing them with tools to ensure that their rights are protected and respected. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, we are looking to continue many of the strategies that we identified on the last slide. So we'll continue promoting the charter, encouraging uptake, and also brainstorming ways to operationalize the charter. And we will work towards developing strategies for ensuring that the voices of people with dementia who are in the later stages are reflected in our advisory group's work. And we're also going to tie the engagement of people with dementia to our policies. And again, we're also open to feedback from those of you here today about what some of our potential next steps could be, or around other ways to operationalize the charter. Next slide, please. In terms of steps that all of us can take after this presentation, we can all commit to familiarizing ourselves with the charter, to challenging ourselves to ensure that we're reframing the way that we think and speak about dementia, to begin taking more of a rights-based approach, to challenging others when we feel that the rights of people with dementia are not being respected or protected. And we can work to become advocates. So those of us with lived experience can begin with sharing our stories with friends, family, healthcare providers, or others in our network, and learn from others about effective forms of advocacy or self-advocacy. Next slide, please. So I know we've gone over a lot of information today, but I think one of the key messages for you to walk away with is that a Charter of Rights can drive change in how dementia-specific services are designed and delivered. It can change the way that dementia is communicated and described in the public. It can influence dementia research priorities and advocacy messages, and it can change the way that people with dementia engage with policymakers and politicians. And there are a number of strategies that you can use to make the Charter an effective advocacy tool. And at the end of the day, having conversations about dementia can be a really valuable first step. Roger, are there any main takeaways that you would like to add here?
I don't know, just knowing that we have rights. There is something, you know, when we talk about care partners, caregivers, family members, I like to use the word supporter, right? People that support people with dementia. It's less of a relationship label, but you know, loved ones, whether husband, wife, brother, sister, whatever you are to the person with dementia, you guys live with this disease as much as we do. And I recognize that in absolutely everything I do. And I guess my point is, when you look at these rights, they're not just rights for people with dementia, they're your rights too. And I imagine you might be running into similar challenges that we would, right? My challenge is your challenge is my challenge, you know, that kind of thing. So it's there for us to use. And my last comment is that I have run into people where has said my rights have never been violated. And that's the way it should be, right? That's the way it should be. And I hope that is the case. But also understand that if something isn't fair and you feel passionate about making a point, that's what our rights are for.
Thanks, Roger. Can we move to the next slide, please? So before we wrap things up, we did want to let everyone know that we're currently expanding our advisory group. People with lived experience of dementia, including care partners, are welcome to reach out to us to find out more about how to get involved in this new advisory group and what this involvement could look like. And a few examples of what your involvement could look like include using the lens of your lived experience to review educational materials, delivering presentations in partnership with us, like this one, telling your story and raising your voice as part of our awareness campaigns, and also participating as citizen reviewers by using your lived experience through the Alzheimer's Society Research Program. And in a couple of slides, my contact information will be available. So if this sounds like something that might be of interest to you, you're welcome to reach out to me and I can connect you with the right person at the Alzheimer's Society to find out more. Roger, is there anything that you wanted to add here?
Yeah, a couple things. There's that reference, participating as citizens, reviewers, lived experience to the Alzheimer's Society research program. There's a lot more to research than just finding a cure. And when people talk about research, this is their perception. But I want you to know that there is research out there that would knock your hair back, blow it back. And when you see the research and you go, oh my God, whatever type of research. I've been through this process as a citizen reviewer, and it changed my life and my perception. And Alzheimer's Canada is looking for people towards things like this. I'd encourage you to seriously think about reaching out maybe to Riley. She'll refer you to the right people for any one thing. We also have an advisor. I encourage people to get involved with that because it's so much fun and interesting, and they want your lived experience. And also we have that advisory group in Canada that we mentioned at the beginning. We're looking for representation across Canada, and for people specifically living with dementia in this advisory group, as we explained. But we have openings in Quebec, Newfoundland, Manitoba, Northwest Territories, Yukon. So we are looking for a number of people in certain parts of the country. So if there's someone out there living with dementia and they want to have their voice heard, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Roger. So on this slide, I've just listed some other resources. If you are interested in learning more about dementia and human rights, these are some great resources for you to check out. The first is a series of podcast episodes about dementia and human rights by Dementia Dialogue. And another great resource is a webinar that's hosted on the platform Brain Exchange called Human Rights in Dementia. And you can find that webinar on the website that's listed on the slide. Next slide, please. So if anyone has any questions or just would like to reach out about this presentation, you're welcome to contact me directly. And my email does appear on this slide. If you would like to take a closer look at the charter, you can find it at alzheimer.ca/charter. And the charter is also available in French. So that wraps up our presentation. So we'll pause here again to take any more questions before we pass things over to Romina.
Okay, thank you, Riley and Roger. So there are two comments, which I'll read those and then we'll go to the questions. One of the comments was the charter ought to be erected in high schools, colleges, and universities, not to mention long-term care homes.
I love that.
And then the other comment, sorry, as I'm scrolling down here, is someone just wanted to add a quote of his that people living with Alzheimer dementia are not the walking dead. So yes, we have rights.
Yes.
And then just going into the questions, which I think some of them have already been answered in your presentation, but one of the questions was, how is this charter being disseminated to ensure that the range of individuals and professional practitioners who should know about this do?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think we did address this during some of the slides, but we are disseminating and promoting the charter through a lot of various avenues. So again, through public presentations and through our website and different awareness campaigns and just in conversations that we have in professional practice. And it is something that we're continuing to explore with the advisory group is how do we continue to promote the charter and ensure that it reaches the people that it needs to reach.
Thank you. The other question was, are you also in conversation with the Parkinson's practitioner community? I noticed that Parkinson's is missing from the list of sources of dementia.
Yes, so that's a good question. So yes, We do have partnerships with various individuals who also either who work with I guess the Parkinson's practitioners as well. And this is certainly something that we want to spread as widely as possible. So those are conversations that we'll continue to have and ensure that, you know, within the partnerships that we have with various organizations or people who are within the Parkinson's practitioner community, that this is something that comes up in those conversations. And I'm glad that you brought this up, because I think that was just, you know, an oversight from our perspective of not including Parkinson's in the list that you're referring to.
Thank you, Riley.
Can I make a comment?
Yep.
Just one thing about that, towards that question, what is Alzheimer's Canada doing to get the message out to organizations? I just want to mention that if through your conversations and you're talking to an organization, you know, they can guess where people they would want to approach and try to get some awareness out there, but I would encourage organizations to reach out to them, right? So if there is say there's a group in Vancouver and maybe they're a rights-based approach organization or just want awareness, you know, I encourage groups to reach out to Alzheimer's Canada as well. Might make things a bit easier.
Thanks, Roger.
And the very last question was, someone was interested in whether the slides or the video would be emailed afterwards.
Yeah, so we mentioned at the beginning that this session is being recorded. So if you are interested in accessing that recording, you're welcome to send me an email. Again, my contact information is on this slide. And I will give you direction on how to access that recording. We haven't decided quite yet exactly where it's going to live. So just feel free to send me a note, and I'll get back to you once we have a sense of how we'll be getting the recording out to people. Okay, so I think that's it from us. So Romina, I'll pass it over to you for your portion of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Riley. Oh, Roger, what is that?
I just said I'll be right back, but keep talking, I can hear you.
All right, sounds good, sir. So hi, everyone. It's great to be here and share with you the work that we do at the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto. In this presentation, I'll walk you through our programs and services and also touch on how our organization has shifted to virtual service delivery in times of COVID-19. So just to give you a bit of history, the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto was founded in 1981, and it is the oldest local Alzheimer's Society in Canada. Right now, there are 29 Alzheimer's Society chapters across Ontario. All chapters offer core services in counseling, education, information, and active living. Now, these services may be called by different names, and each local chapter may provide additional services based on community needs. The Toronto chapter works within the boundaries of the M postal code. Our head office is at Yonge and Eglinton, and we also have satellite clinics in North York, Scarborough, and the west of Toronto. So on this slide, you'll see an overview of our programs and services. As you can see, we offer a range of educational and support services for caregivers, people living with dementia, healthcare professionals, and the general public as well. So I will note that all of our programming is offered at no cost to our clients. People usually get connected to us through the First Link referral service. So typically when a diagnosis of dementia is made, the doctor or the healthcare provider will fill out a referral form. This request is then processed by our intake department, who connects with the client to discuss the needs and how best the Alzheimer's Society can support them. The focus of First Link is reaching people as early as possible in the disease, although referrals can be made at any time. The First Link program will also connect the client to services within the Alzheimer's Society, as well as services in the community. Now, we all know that healthcare navigation can be daunting and overwhelming. So people may be unsure of where to start looking for information and resources, or have difficulty coordinating their existing services. The Alzheimer's Society Care Navigation team supports clients with connecting to dementia supports and services. The Care Navigator at the Society is your go-to person and will assess your needs, create a support plan for you, help you connect and coordinate services, and follows up to ensure that care plan is continued and that it's the right one for you. Please note, however, that this service is not a crisis service. As mentioned, we offer free counseling for clients and families, as well as support on a number of topics, including community navigation, communication strategies, reducing caregiver stress, planning for the future, coping with responsive behavior and long-distance caregiving. And you can access our counseling services by calling the number on the slide here. At this time, all counseling is being done virtually via phone or Zoom. Now, we also have support groups which meet regularly and discuss issues associated with Alzheimer's, dementia, and the caregiving journey. Some of the groups that are available are listed here. And again, these can be accessed at no cost through our organization. The CARES program was developed by the Reitman Center at Sinai Health System. It's an 8-week skills-based program for care partners. CARES focuses on practical skills and emotional support, as well as teaches problem-solving techniques. This program is interactive and utilizes simulation to coach care partners. Our program lead is Katie McLean, and if anyone is interested, I'm more than happy to pass along her contact information. And just a quick reminder, if you are calling in, please press *6 to mute your line, just to avoid any background noise. Thank you. The TEACH program is another interactive group for care partners of people living with dementia. This group is shorter in duration. It's 4 weeks long and focuses on common caregiving issues, including healthcare, system navigation, relationship changes, and future planning. And TEACH is also offered in collaboration with the Reitman Center at Sinai Health System. We offer many educational workshops and learning opportunities for care partners and people living with dementia, including Dementia 101, understanding behavior and communication strategies, caregiver stress, as well as all of the other topics that are mentioned on the right side here: long-term care planning, long-distance caregiving, finding joy and humor in dementia care, coping with death and grief for care partners, as well as overviews on updates in Alzheimer's disease research. One of the pillars, my apologies. So pre-COVID, we delivered education in person through individual or a series of workshops. Now, all education is offered online, and I'll get to this shortly. But we also offer education through education forums and presentations via information packages that you can request by contacting us, as well as via our ALS Educate, which is our online portal where you can take part in webinars and e-learning modules. ALS Educate is the online education portal that I just mentioned, and you can choose to take part in webinars or in self-paced 60-minute modules that cover the basics of dementia, communication, and behavior. One of the pillars of our programs and services is the Active Living Program, which offers social recreational programming for people with dementia as well as their care partners. We offer a range of activities that promote health and wellness and encourage socialization, physical movement, and cognitive stimulation. Some of the programs that are offered are listed here, and they can also be found on our website. As mentioned earlier, our programming has transitioned to online delivery due to COVID. We continue to be fully operational and continue to counsel clients as well as provide education and active living. Things look a little bit different, but the core of services and programs remains. One of the staples of the Alzheimer Toronto is the Music Project. In 2006, Dan Cohen founded Music and Memory in one nursing home in the US with the hope that every single resident that was in homes would receive a personalized iPod. In 2012, Alzheimer's Society of Toronto co-screened the documentary Alive Inside, the story of music and memory. This screening was so touching and powerful that we quickly received funding to begin our own program here in Toronto. Since then, we've been able to connect with over 2,000 recipients living in Toronto. Now, this is a free program, and you can apply for your own personalized player online via themusicproject.ca. Finding Your Way is a province-wide program that aims to raise public awareness of the risk of people going missing. Research has shown that 6 out of 10 people with dementia will go missing, often without warning, and half of those go missing for 24 hours or longer, end up seriously hurt or unfortunately dead. That's why it's so important to offer assistance when we come across someone who seems lost or confused. Finding Your Way encourages families to create a safety plan, which includes filling out an identification kit that can be handed to the police if the person goes missing, and registering with the Medical Alert Safely Home program. Finding Your Way also provides tip sheets and information on what to do during and after a missing incident. More information can be found on the website on the slide here, and please don't worry, we will make these slides available to you after the presentation. The Medical Alert Safely Home, or MASH program, is a national program and can be accessed if people are traveling abroad to places like the US. The basic premise of the program is that if a person with dementia is out in the community and they become disoriented, they will always have some sort of identification on them that will allow them to be returned home safely, even if they're not able to remember where home is. If someone calls the telephone number that's on the flip side of the bracelet, they will be connected to the Medical Alert emergency hotline available in 140 languages. This specific program has a fee associated with it. It's $5 per month or $60 per year. Now, the cost may differ if you choose to have a customized bracelet or one that looks a little bit different than the one you see on the slide here. Now, if you're outside of Toronto, we invite you to connect to your local chapter. As mentioned, we have over 29 chapters across the province. The link here will give you information on all of the chapters' locations, as well as the programs and services that are offered at each chapter. And as always, you can connect with us, the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto. We will make all of that contact information available for you. And that is it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks, Romina. And I'll just add quickly that this link on the last slide here, alzheimer.ca/help near you, will also be able to direct you to your local society if you are outside of Ontario as well. So anywhere in Canada, you'll be able to go on here and see all of the provincial and local societies listed. And as Romina mentioned, you can contact either the Alzheimer's Society of Toronto or the Alzheimer's Society Canada if you'd like some support in finding the office that is closest to you. So it looks like we don't have any questions coming in. So I think on that note, we can wrap things up a couple of minutes early, and we just wanted to thank each and every one of you again for attending this presentation and participating in this conversation with us. And we hope that, well, I guess, Roger, I'll check in with you. Are there any last comments that you wanted to make before we wrap things up?
No, well,
okay?
one, that Safe Lay at Home program, I use that. I've been disorientated in a familiar place, and I use a GPS app on my phone that my brother keeps an eye on me, and I also have a lower tech, the bracelet itself. So anyone living with dementia, whether you've been lost or not, be proactive, take advantage of that program. It's awesome.
Thanks, Roger. Okay, so on that note, I guess we'll wrap things up, and thank you everyone again for joining us here today, and enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a wonderful weekend. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
You.